I worked 3 jobs for 4 years straight. Construction during the day until my hands bled through my work gloves. Warehouse at night loading trucks until my back screamed. Food delivery on weekends, driving through rain, snow, whatever it took. All of it. Every single exhausting hour was for one purpose: putting my fiancée Ashley Morgan through law school. The day she passed the bar exam, I thought we'd made it. I actually thought all that sacrifice had been worth something. But Ashley looked me dead in the eyes that night. Her new designer suit perfectly pressed her manicured nails drumming on the restaurant table, and said the words that destroyed everything I believed in. Michael, I need someone on my level now. This was never going to work long term. 4 years of my life gone just like that. But what happened 3 months later when I was delivering food to a dying old woman? That changed everything. That one delivery showed me exactly what my level really was. And it was so far above anything Ashley could ever reach. My name is Michael Carter, and I'm about to tell you how losing everything I thought I wanted led me to find something worth $50 million that my mother left me before she died, giving birth to me. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you how I learned that some people will only value you for what you can give them, while others will move heaven and earth to make sure you're taken care of, even if they never get to meet you. I was 33 years old, living in a studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanged all night. My entire life had been about survival, not living. My mother, Laura Whitmore Carter, died the day I was born. Complications during delivery that nobody saw coming. My father, Frank Carter, raised me alone, working as a mechanic grease under his fingernails and love in his heart. He died in a car accident when I was 22, leaving me completely alone in the world. That's when Ashley came into my life. Beautiful, ambitious Ashley Morgan with her perfect smile and her 5-year plan that she had mapped out to the smallest detail. She was going to be a lawyer at a top firm. She was going to drive a Mercedes. She was going to own a penthouse apartment overlooking the city. And somehow, in all those plans, I thought I had a permanent place. "You're my foundation," she used to tell me when we'd lie in bed in our cramped apartment, law books scattered everywhere. "I couldn't do this without you, Michael." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. So when she got into law school, I didn't hesitate. I dropped out of community college where I'd been studying business management. I picked up that first construction job with Hawkins Construction, working for a foreman named Bill Hawkins, who'd bark orders from sunrise to sunset. The warehouse job came next, starting at 10 p.m. and running until 6:00 a.m., just enough time to shower the sweat off before heading back to construction. Weekends meant driving for Metro Eats delivery, zigzagging across the city with bags of food getting cold in my back seat. My buddy Andre Jackson worked construction with me. He'd watch me stumble onto the site every morning, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking from exhaustion. "Man, you're going to kill yourself for that girl," he'd say, shaking his head while we laid foundation. "What's she doing for you while you're out here breaking your back?" "She's studying," I'd defend her. "When she becomes a lawyer, we'll both benefit. This is an investment in our future." Andre would just look at me with pity in his eyes. "If you say so, brother, just remember investments are supposed to pay dividends." Ashley never saw the worst of it. She never saw me throwing up from exhaustion behind the construction site. She never saw me sleeping in my truck between jobs because driving home would waste precious minutes. She never saw me counting out exact change for ramen noodles because every spare dollar went to her textbooks, her test prep courses, her professional wardrobe for internships. The night she got her bar exam results, I had it all planned out. I traded shifts with 3 different drivers to get the evening off. I bought roses with my tip money, the nice kind, from an actual florist, not the grocery store. I even splurged on a bottle of real champagne, not the cheap sparkling wine we usually got. She was having dinner with her law school friends at Ross's Prime Italian, this Italian place, where appetizers cost more than I made in a day. I surprised her there, walking in with my best clean shirt, the roses hidden behind my back. Her friend Chloe Bennett saw me first, and I'll never forget the way her face twisted like she'd smelled something bad. "Oh," Chloe said loud enough for the whole table to hear. "The delivery boy is here." I should have known then. I should have seen it in the way Ashley's shoulders tensed, the way she didn't immediately correct Chloe, the way she looked at her other friends before looking at me. But I was too happy, too proud of her, too blind to see what was right in front of me. Margaret Ellis was 85 years old, confined to a hospital bed in the hospice wing of Cedar Grove Senior Living. She'd ordered the simplest thing on our menu: chicken soup and saltine crackers. The kind of order that barely covers the delivery fee. The kind of order I'd normally be annoyed about driving all the way across town for a $5 tip if I was lucky. But that night, that order, that dying old woman who gasped when she saw my name tag, who asked if I was Laura's son, who started crying and begging me to sit down because she had something my mother had left with me 34 years ago, that changed everything. That showed me what real love looks like, what real sacrifice means, and what it truly means to be on a level that some people can only dream of reaching. This is that story. My life with Ashley had a rhythm to it, predictable as clockwork and just as mechanical. Every morning at 4:00 a.m., my phone alarm would vibrate under my pillow so it wouldn't wake her. I'd slip out of bed in the dark, my body protesting, every movement joint stiff from yesterday's labor. In our tiny kitchen, I'd make her breakfast: scrambled eggs with cheese, whole wheat toast, fresh fruit when I could afford it, coffee in her favorite Columbia Law mug. I'd leave it all covered on the counter with a note: "Crushing it today. Beautiful. Love, M." By 4:45 a.m., I was in my truck driving to the construction site where Bill Hawkins ran the tightest crew in the city. Bill was 63, built like a brick house, with hands that could bend rebar and a voice that could make grown men flinch. But he had a soft spot for me, probably because he saw something familiar in my desperation. Carter had shouted when I dragged myself onto the site. "You look like death warmed over. When's the last time you got 8 hours?" "Sleep is for people without goals," Bill I'd reply, grabbing my hard hat. "Goals or a death wish," he'd mutter, but he'd always assign me the overtime shifts when I asked. The construction work was brutal but honest. We were building a new children's hospital on the south side, and sometimes I'd think about the kids who would get better there while my hands bled into my work gloves. My crew partner, Andre Jackson, would work beside me, sharing stories about his 2 kids. His wife, Tanya, who worked as a school teacher. Tanya packed extra sandwiches again, Andre would say at lunch, pushing half his food toward me. "She says you're too skinny for construction work." I was too proud to tell him that his wife's extra sandwiches were sometimes the only real meal I'd eat all day. The rest was protein bars, energy drinks, whatever I could swallow quickly between jobs. By 6:00 p.m., when the construction shift ended, other guys would head to Murphy's bar to wash the dust down with beer and friendship. I'd drive straight to the warehouse for my 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. shift. The supervisor there, Derek Shaw, was a former Marine who ran the night crew like a military operation. He respected hard work and never asked questions about the concrete dust still in my hair or the way my hands shook from fatigue during the 3:00 a.m. slump. Our apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building where the elevator had been temporarily broken for 3 years. 750 square feet that cost more than it should because it was close to Ashley's law school. The walls were thin enough that we could hear our neighbor Mr. Chen's television and Mrs. Rodriguez's baby crying at all hours. But Ashley had transformed it into her study sanctuary. Law books dominated every surface. The dining table we'd found at a yard sale was buried under case studies and legal pads filled with her meticulous handwriting. Shed color-coded everything with highlighters that cost more than my lunch budget for a week. Post-it notes covered our refrigerator with Latin legal terms I couldn't pronounce. The living room had become her mock courtroom where she'd practice closing arguments while I sat on our second-hand couch playing the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she'd say, pacing in front of me in her pajamas, "my client has been wrongfully accused, and I will prove beyond reasonable doubt that justice demands his acquittal." She was magnificent when she practiced all fire and passion and conviction. I'd watch her and think, this is why I'm doing this. This brilliant woman is going to change the world, and I get to be part of that journey. Ashley came from middle-class comfort in Connecticut. Her father sold insurance. Her mother was a dental hygienist. They'd helped with her undergraduate degree, but law school was supposed to be her own achievement. I want to earn this myself, she told me early in our relationship. I want to prove I can do it. What she really meant was she wanted me to prove she could do it. I'd met her at a coffee shop near the community college where I was taking night classes before Dad died. She was reading a political science textbook, highlighting with such intensity that she'd torn through the page. I'd offered her my unopened highlighter, and she'd smiled at me like I'd handed her gold. My hero, Shed said, and I was gone. My father, Frank Carter, had been my whole world after Mom died. He never remarried, never even dated that I knew about. Your mother was it for me, he'd say on the rare occasions he'd have a beer and get sentimental. Some people get one great love, and Laura was mine. He'd worked at Denton Auto Repair for 20 years, coming home with permanently stained fingers and stories about carburetors and transmission problems. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental house with a leaky roof and a furnace that needed coaxing, but it was home. He taught me about hard work, about showing up even when you didn't feel like it, about taking care of the people you love. Your mother would be so proud of you. He'd tell me when I brought home good grades or helped him fix a neighbor's car for free. She was smart like you, always reading, always dreaming about making things better. He never told me she came from money, never mentioned the Whitmore family fortune or the inheritance that was waiting for me. Maybe he thought protecting me from that knowledge was love. Maybe it was. When Dad died, I was 22 and completely unprepared. The funeral costs wiped out his savings and my college fund. Ashley stood beside me at the cemetery, holding my hand while they lowered his casket into the ground beside Mom's weathered headstone. "I'm here," Shed whispered. "You're not alone anymore." For 4 years, I believed that promise. I structured my entire existence around her success. When she studied until 3:00 a.m., I'd quietly make her fresh coffee. When she stressed about exams, I'd massage her shoulders and tell her she was brilliant. When she cried about the pressure about the competitive classmates and brutal professors, I'd hold her and promise that it would all be worth it. Her study group would sometimes meet at our apartment. Trust fund kids named Jason, Olivia, and Tyler, who'd complain about having to choose between summer houses while I served them snacks bought with my overtime pay. They'd talk about their parents' law firms, their guaranteed positions after graduation, their European vacations planned for after the bar exam. "What about you, Michael?" Olivia asked, once her voice dripping with false interest. "What are your plans after Ashley passes the bar?" Has exploring his options. Ashley had answered quickly before I could speak. Michael's very entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial, that was her code word for unemployable in her new world. But I had dreams once. Before Dad died, I was studying business management with a plan to open my own auto repair shop that would offer fair prices and teach kids from the neighborhood about cars. I wanted to name it Frank's Haven after Dad. Those dreams got buried with him, replaced by the singular focus of getting Ashley through law school. That was my life. Construction, warehouse, delivery, repeat. 7 days a week, 4 years straight, all leading to that moment in Ross's prime Italian when everything it built came crashing down around me. The bar exam results came on a Tuesday in September. It had been raining all day, the kind of cold, persistent drizzle that soaks through everything and makes your bones ache. I was on the construction site when Ashley texted me, "Results are in." I passed, followed by a string of champagne bottle emojis. I actually whooped out loud right there in the middle of laying concrete foundation. Andre slapped me on the back so hard I nearly fell over. Bill Hawkins even cracked a smile, which was about as common as finding diamonds in your lunchbox. "Your girl passed," Bill asked, and when I nodded, He did something unprecedented. Take the rest of the day off, Carter. Paid. You've earned it. I drove straight to Langford Wine and Cellar, the fancy place downtown where they look at you funny if you're wearing work boots. I spent $200 on a bottle of champagne from France money I'd been secretly saving by skipping lunches for 2 months. The saleswoman wrapped it in tissue paper like it was made of gold, and I carried it to my truck like I was holding a newborn baby. Ashley had texted that she was celebrating with her study group at Ross's Prime Italian at 7:00 p.m. I went home first, showered until the hot water ran out, trying to get the concrete dust out of my hair. I put on my one good shirt, the blue button-down I'd worn to Dad's funeral, and hadn't touched since. I even tried to clean under my fingernails with a brush, though the construction stains were pretty much permanent at that point. The roses cost another $60 at the florist shop. Someone's in trouble or in love. The elderly woman behind the counter said with a knowing smile, "In love, I told her. My fiancé just became a lawyer. Lucky woman," she said, adding baby's breath to the bouquet for free. Ross's Prime Italian was the kind of restaurant where they had a valet and a maitre d' who pronounced French wines without stumbling. I'd never been inside before, only delivered food to their back entrance a few times. Walking through the front door felt like entering another universe, one with cloth napkins, multiple forks, and hushed conversations about stock portfolios. I spotted Ashley's table immediately. She was in the center holding court, her blonde hair pinned up in that twist she only did for special occasions. She was wearing a new dress, black and sophisticated, nothing like the sundresses she used to wear when we'd have picnics in the park, back when we first dated. Her whole study group was there, Jason Whitfield with his Kennedy jaw and senatorial laugh. Olivia Morrison, who'd been turned at her father's firm, Tyler Coleman, who'd never worked a day in his life, and Chloe Bennett, who looked at people like me as if we were a different species. I approached with the roses behind my back, my heart hammering with pride and love. Chloe saw me first. Her expression shifted from animated conversation to something like disgust, as if a rat had just scurried across the floor. "Oh," she said loud enough to stop all conversation. "The delivery boy is here." The words hit like a physical blow, but what hurt worse was the silence that followed. Nobody corrected her. Nobody laughed it off. Ashley's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, embarrassment, and finally resignation. "Michael," she said, not getting up, not reaching for me. "I didn't know you were coming. I wanted to surprise you," I said, pulling out the roses, trying to salvage the moment. "Congratulations, baby. You did it." She took the roses like they were something contaminated, setting them quickly on an empty chair. "Thanks, everyone." "You know, Michael." The table murmured acknowledgments without making eye contact. Jason Whitfield actually checked his Rolex as if I'd interrupted something important. I stood there holding that expensive champagne in its tissue paper wrapping, feeling like a child who'd wandered into an adult party. "We should talk," Ashley said suddenly, standing up. She walked ahead of me, her new heels clicking on the marble floor. The valet attendants watched us pass, and I wondered what they saw, the lawyer and the laborer, the success story, and her baggage. In the parking lot, under the yellow glow of expensive lighting, Ashley turned to face me. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture. She crossed her arms, a gesture I recognized as her building walls. "Michael, we need to discuss our future." "I know things will change now." I started trying to sound supportive. "You'll be working long hours at first, but we can make it work. I can adjust my schedule and maybe finally go back to school myself." She actually laughed, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of laugh that cuts. "Michael, look at yourself. Look at us. Do you really think this was ever going to work long term?" The words didn't make sense at first. My brain refused to process them. "What are you talking about?" "We're getting married. We have plans." "No, Michael, you had plans. I had necessities. There's a difference." The champagne bottle suddenly felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Necessities. She sighed like I was a slow student who couldn't grasp a simple concept. I needed support through law school. You provided that, and I'm grateful. But I'm entering a different world now. Partners at Henderson, Blake & Pierce don't have husbands who deliver food. Associates don't bring construction workers to firm galas. It's not personal. It's practical. 4 years, I said, my voice cracking. I worked 3 jobs for 4 years. And that was your choice, she replied, cool as the September rain. I never forced you to do that. You said you loved me. You said I was your foundation. Foundations get built over Michael. That's what they're for. She pulled off the engagement ring I'd saved 2 years to buy, working extra shifts, selling my father's tools, even his watch. The diamond was small, but it was real, and I'd been so proud when I'd presented it to her. Keep it, she said, pressing it into my palm. Maybe you can get something nice for yourself. Then she turned and walked back toward the restaurant, toward her new life, toward the people who belonged in her world. At the door, she paused and looked back one more time. I need someone on my level now, Michael. Surely you can understand that. The door closed behind her with a soft whoosh of expensive hydraulics. I stood in that parking lot holding the champagne I couldn't afford and the ring she didn't want, watching through the windows as she rejoined her table. They all laughed at something Jason said, and Ashley smiled like she'd just been freed from prison. Her new Mercedes was parked 3 spots away from my beat-up truck. She'd bought it with her signing bonus from Henderson, Blake & Pierce, where she'd accepted a position starting at more money than I'd made in the last 2 years combined. The contrast between our vehicles said everything about the distance between USA gap that my love and sacrifice could never bridge. I drove home in silence. No radio, no nothing. Just the sound of my windshield wipers pushing away new rain. The champagne rode shotgun still in its tissue paper, a monument to my stupidity. When I got back to the apartment, I found Shed already been there. Half the closet was empty. The law books were gone. Shed left the furniture, the dishes, everything we'd bought together at yard sales and thrift stores. Shed only taken what was hers, what had value in her new world. On the kitchen counter, Shed left a note. The lease is paid through the end of the month. Good luck, Michael. Good luck. 4 years of my life and all I got was good luck. I sat on our second-hand couch in our empty apartment and opened that $200 champagne. I drank it straight from the bottle alone, toasting the fool who thought love meant sacrifice, who believed that building someone else's dreams meant you got to share them when they came true. 3 months after Ashley left, I was a ghost of myself. I'd moved into a studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant on Maple Avenue, where the smell of sesame oil and soy sauce became my permanent cologne. The rent was half what our old place cost, and it showed. The radiator clanged like it was dying. The single window faced a brick wall, and the bathroom faucet dripped with the persistence of water torture. But it was mine, and nobody could take it away. I'd quit the warehouse job and dropped most of my construction shifts. Bill Hawkins tried to talk sense into me when I told him I was cutting back. Carter, you're my best worker. Don't let that woman ruin you, he'd said, genuine concern creasing his weathered face. I'm not letting her do anything, I'd replied. I'm just tired, Bill. Bone-deep tired. I kept the delivery job because it required the least from me. Just driving, following GPS directions, dropping off bags of food to people who barely looked at me. It was perfect. No thinking, no feeling, just existing. Luis Rivera, my supervisor at Metro Eats Delivery, noticed the change immediately. Luis was 5'4" of compressed energy and paternal concern, a former boxer who'd traded the ring for raising 3 daughters and managing drivers. You used to smile, Hermano, he said one evening as I picked up my delivery orders. Now you look like you're attending your own funeral. Some days it feels like I am I admitted, grabbing the insulated bags. You know what you need? You need to remember who you were before her. Find that guy again. But I couldn't remember who that was. Had I ever been anyone without someone else to take care of? First, Dad needed me after Mom died. Then after Dad died, Ashley needed me, or at least I thought she did. Now, with no one to sacrifice for, I didn't know what to do with myself. That Tuesday night in December, the order came through on my phone. 1 chicken soup and 1 pack of saltine crackers. Delivery to Cedar Grove Senior Living Room 314 Hospice Wing. The name on the order was Margaret Ellis. I almost declined it. Cedar Grove was a 30-minute drive across town, and the order total was barely $8. The tip would be minimal, if anything. But something made me accept it. Maybe it was the hospice wing designation. Maybe it was knowing someone was dying and just wanted hot soup. Maybe I was just tired of saying no to everything. Cedar Grove. Senior living was beautiful in that way. Expensive places always are manicured lawns. Even in winter, a circular driveway with a fountain that probably cost more than it'd make in 5 years, windows that gleamed like they were cleaned daily. The hospice wing was in a separate building connected by a covered walkway. Quieter, more subdued, like the building itself was whispering. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes named Kelly Adams, gave me a sad smile when I said I had a delivery for Margaret Ellis. Room 314, she said softly. She's very ill, I'm afraid. If she's sleeping, just leave it on her nightstand. She rarely eats, but she insists on ordering soup every few days. I think she just wants to feel normal, you know. I nodded and made my way down the hushed hallway. The rooms I passed had their doors slightly open, revealing glimpses of final chapters. An old man watching a baseball game with the sound off. A woman knitting despite her shaking hands. A couple holding hands while one slept and the other kept vigil. Room 3114 was at the end of the hall. I knocked gently and heard a weak but clear voice say, "Come in." Margaret Ellis was propped up in a hospital bed that seemed to swallow her tiny frame. She couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds. Her white hair was thin but neatly brushed, and she wore a lavender bed jacket that looked hand-knitted. But her eyes, sharp, bright blue and fully alert despite the morphine drip attached to her arm at mine with startling focus. "Dinner delivery," I said, trying to sound cheerful. 1 chicken soup and crackers. I set the bag on her nightstand and turned to leave, but she was staring at me with an intensity that made me pause. Her eyes went wide and her thin hand flew to her mouth. "Wait," she said, her voice suddenly stronger. "Your name tag, what's your name?" I touched the plastic Metro Eats name tag on my shirt. "Michael. Michael Carter." The change in her was immediate and dramatic. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her papery cheeks. Her whole body began to tremble, and for a moment I thought she was having a medical emergency. "Are you Laura's son?" she gasped. Laura Carter. The sound of my mother's name from this stranger's lips made me freeze. Nobody had said her name to me in years. Even Dad had struggled to talk about her, usually referring to her as your mother when he had to mention her at all. "Laura was my mother," I said slowly, "but she died when I was born." "Did you know her?" Margaret began sobbing in earnest, now reaching out with both hands toward me. "Oh, my dear boy, sit down. Please, you must sit down. I've been looking for you for 34 years. I found myself sinking into the visitor's chair beside her bed, my heart pounding. "Looking for me. Why, I was her nurse," Margaret said, clutching at tissues. "Margaret Ellis, though I was Margaret Brennan back then. I was young, just 25, working labor and delivery at St. Andrew's Medical Center. Your mother, she knew something was wrong. She could feel it. The doctor kept saying everything was fine, but Laura knew." Margaret reached for a glass of water with shaking hands, and I helped her take a sip. She continued, her voice urgent, like she was afraid she'd run out of time before she could tell me everything. 2 days before you were born, Laura pulled me aside. She was so beautiful. Your mother, thick dark hair and those green eyes that seemed to see right through you. She pressed an envelope into my hands and made me swear on everything holy that if anything happened to her, I would keep it safe until you were old enough to understand. What kind of envelope? My voice came out strangled. Legal documents, a letter, and this. Margaret turned to her nightstand drawer, fumbling with arthritic fingers, until she pulled out a small safety deposit box key on a chain. She said you needed to be at least 30 before you'd understand. You're 33 now, aren't you? How did you know that? Because I've kept track of when you were born. December 12th, 1991, at 2:38 a.m. I was there, Michael. I held you when you took your first breath while your mother took her last. The room spun around me. This woman had been there at the moment my existence cost my mother hers. She'd witnessed the terrible trade that defined my entire life. Your father, Frank. He was destroyed? Margaret continued. He held you and sobbed. Then he disappeared. He left the hospital with you and never came back. Changed addresses, changed phone numbers. I tried to find you both for years. I hired private investigators with my own money. When the internet became a thing, I searched social media endlessly. Nothing. Dad was protecting me, I said, understanding flooding through me. From something or someone. Margaret nodded. From your mother's family, the Whitmore family, but also from this. She held up the envelope. Michael, your mother wasn't just some young woman. She was an heiress, and she left you everything. I stared at the envelope in her hands, unable to process what she was saying. I don't understand. Sit back, dear boy. Margaret said, her voice gentle but firm. There's so much you need to know about who your mother really was and why she made the choices she did. But first you need to understand that everything she did, including the contents of this envelope, she did out of love for you. A love so powerful that even death couldn't stop her from taking care of you. Margaret reached into her nightstand drawer with trembling hands, pulling out a manila envelope that had yellowed with age. The corners were soft from decades of handling, and I could see water stains as if someone had cried over it more than once. She placed it in my hands like she was passing me something sacred. Your mother was Laura Whitmore before she became Laura Carter. Margaret began, her voice steady despite her frailty. The Whitmore family owns half the commercial real estate in New England. Shopping centers, office buildings, entire city blocks. Old money, the kind that traces back to railroad barons and shipping magnates. I stared at the envelope, unable to open it yet. That's impossible. Dad worked in an auto shop. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Because your father loved your mother enough to let her choose love over money, Margaret said. Frank was working at the Whitmore estate as a mechanic, taking care of their collection of vintage cars. Laura was 22, just back from college. They fell in love, and when Richard and Evelyn Whitmore found out their daughter was dating the help, they gave her an ultimatum. She paused to catch her breath, the effort of talking clearly, exhausting her, but her eyes burned with urgency, like she'd waited too long to tell this story and wouldn't let death stop her now. They told Laura she could have her inheritance, her trust fund, her place in society, or she could have Frank. She couldn't have both. Your mother walked out of that mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back and never looked back. But you said she left me everything I said, confused. Margaret smiled, a secret smile that made her look decades younger. Laura was smarter than her parents knew. Her grandmother, Lillian Whitmore, had left her a separate trust when she died. It was to mature when Laura turned 35, completely independent of the family money. Richard and Evelyn couldn't touch it. Laura knew about it, but she never told them. I finally opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside were legal documents, bank papers, and a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery. The letterhead read, "Laura Elizabeth Whitmore in elegant script." "Read the letter first," Margaret urged. "The rest will make sense after." I unfolded the letter, my mother's handwriting flowing across the page in careful cursive. "My dearest Michael, if you're reading this, it means I didn't survive to hold you to watch you grow to be the mother I desperately wanted to be. I'm writing this 2 days before your birth, and somehow I know I won't make it through. Call it mother's intuition or just the deep understanding my body has given me. But I need you to know that you are not responsible for my death. You are the greatest gift I could ever give this world. Your father doesn't know what I'm about to tell you, and he may be angry that I've kept this secret. But I wanted us to build a life based on love, not money. I wanted him to love me, not for what I could provide, and he did. Oh, Michael, how he loved me, and how I love him still. My grandmother Lillian left me a trust fund worth $9 million to be available when I turned 35. Since I won't reach that age, I've arranged with lawyers to have it transferred to you to mature when you turn 33. By then, with proper investment, it should be worth much more. The trustee is Edward Ellis, the husband of the wonderful nurse who promised to deliver this to you. They are good people, Michael. You can trust them. But there's more. I've been investing secretly using money I saved from tutoring and selling my jewelry. I bought shares in technology companies that everyone says will change the world: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. They're all in a separate portfolio also in your name. I don't know what they'll be worth when you receive this, but I pray they'll give you the freedom I want you to have. My parents, your grandparents, are cold people who believe money makes them superior to others. They told me I was betraying my bloodline by marrying your father. They said I would regret choosing love over security. They were wrong. The only thing I regret is that I won't see you become the man I know you'll be. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not enough, my darling boy. Not because of what you do for work, not because of your bank account, not because of your last name. You are the son of Frank Carter, the best man I ever knew who loved me enough to let me be myself. And you are the son of Laura Whitmore Carter, who loved you enough to ensure you'd never have to sacrifice your dreams for anyone who doesn't deserve them. Use this money to live freely. Use it to follow your dreams. Use it to love without fear. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember that you were worth everything to me. You were worth my inheritance, my family name, and even my life, and I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. All my love, Mom. I couldn't see the letter anymore through my tears. Margaret reached over and took my hand in her papery grip. There's more, she whispered. Look at the portfolio statement. I pulled out a document dated just last month. My eyes couldn't process the numbers at first. The original $9 million from my grandmother's trust, the invested money my mother had secretly saved. 40 years of compound interest and stock growth. The Apple shares alone that she'd bought for pennies were now worth millions. $46 million, Margaret said quietly. The current value is $46 million, Michael. Your mother turned $9 million into $46 million because Edward, my late husband, was a brilliant financial advisor who treated your mother's trust like it was his own child. He died 2 years ago, but the lawyers at Henderson, Blake & Pierce have been managing it since, waiting for you to claim it. The room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. This can't be real. There's one more thing, Margaret said, reaching for another document. Your grandparents are still alive. Richard and Evelyn Whitmore. They're in their 80s now, living in the same mansion where your mother grew up in Winter Haven, Connecticut. Richard had a heart attack last year. Word through mutual friends is that it changed him. They have no other children, Michael. Laura was their only child. They've been looking for you, too. I thought about Ashley's words that night at the restaurant. I need someone on my level now. She had no idea what level I was actually on. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. Why didn't my father tell me? I asked, my voice hollow. Margaret squeezed my hand. I think Frank was protecting you from the pain of rejection. The Whitmore family had hurt Laura so deeply. Maybe he thought if you never knew about them, they couldn't hurt you too. Or maybe he just wanted you to know you were loved for who you are, not for what you might inherit. I looked at the dying woman who'd kept this secret for 34 years, who'd searched for me relentlessly, who'd honored a promise to my mother with unwavering loyalty. Margaret, why did you keep looking for me all these years? Her eyes filled with fresh tears. Because I held your mother's hand as she died, Michael. And with her last breath, she made me promise that you would know you were loved. She made me promise you would know you were worth everything. A promise to a dying mother is sacred. I couldn't meet my own end without fulfilling it. The safety deposit box key hung from her trembling fingers, catching the late afternoon light. This is for the box at Union Trust Bank downtown. Your mother's jewelry is there, including her engagement ring from your father. She wanted you to have it for when you found someone who loved you for exactly who you are. I took the key, feeling the weight of 34 years of secrets in my palm. The poor delivery driver, who wasn't good enough for a newly minted lawyer, was actually worth more than Ashley's entire law firm. The man who'd been told he wasn't on her level was in fact so far above it that he could have bought the building her office was in. Margaret's eyes were growing heavy, the effort of telling this story clearly exhausting her. Your mother also left you something else in that box, she murmured. Photos of her and your father, their wedding album. She wanted you to see how happy they were, how right she was to choose love. I sat in my truck outside Cedar Grove Senior Living for 2 hours, unable to drive, unable to move, unable to process that my entire life had been built on a foundation I never knew existed. The envelope lay on my passenger seat like it might evaporate if I looked away. $46 million. My mother had loved me $46 million worth, and I never even knew her name was Whitmore. The next morning, I walked into Union Trust Bank wearing the same jeans and work shirt I'd worn to deliver Margaret's soup. The bank manager nearly called security when I asked to access a safety deposit box that had been sitting untouched for 34 years. But when I showed him the key and the legal documents, his entire demeanor changed. Suddenly, I wasn't a delivery driver anymore. I was Mr. Carter, sir. And would you like to use our private viewing room? He asked politely. Inside the box was my mother's engagement ring from my father, a simple solitaire diamond that was worth more in love than in money. There were photographs of my parents on their wedding day. My mother radiant in a simple white dress. My father looking at her like she hung the moon. There was a photo of my mother pregnant with me, her hand resting on her belly, smiling directly at the camera with a note on the back. You're already so loved, little one. And there was her jewelry pieces she'd inherited from my great-grandmother Lillian. Things her parents couldn't take back. A pearl necklace, diamond earrings, a sapphire brooch. Each piece had a note attached explaining its history, its value, like my mother knew I might need to sell them someday, but I never would. They were all I had of her besides the money. The lawyers at Henderson, Blake & Pierce treated me like royalty when I arrived for my appointment, the same firm where Ashley now worked as a junior associate, grinding away 80-hour weeks for a fraction of what my portfolio earned in daily interest. Mr. Carter, the senior partner Daniel Pierce himself, said, as he shook my hand, "We've been waiting for you for a very long time. Your mother's instructions were very specific about how her assets should be managed until you were ready to receive them. The paperwork took 3 days to complete transfer documents, tax forms, investment portfolios that stretched across dozens of pages. My mother hadn't just left me money. She'd left me freedom. The first thing I did was ensure Margaret Ellis had the best care money could buy. I hired round-the-clock private nurses, brought in specialists, and made sure she had fresh flowers delivered every single day. I visited her every evening after my delivery shifts, which I kept working because I wasn't ready for my life to change completely yet. "You don't have to do this," Margaret protested weakly when she saw the luxury suite I'd moved her to. "You kept a promise to my mother for 34 years, I told her. This is nothing compared to that." Margaret lived 3 more weeks. I was there when she passed, holding her hand the same way she'd held my mother's. Her last words were, "Tell Laura I kept my promise." After her funeral, which I paid for, and where I was the only mourner besides Kelly, the nurse who'd been kind to her, I sat down to make decisions about my future. The money felt surreal, like numbers on a screen that had nothing to do with the Michael Carter who destroyed his body working 3 jobs. I didn't seek revenge on Ashley. When she found out through office gossip about my inheritance, she tried calling 17 missed calls in one day. Text messages about misunderstandings and hasty decisions, and we should talk about us. I blocked her number without responding. Then I did something better. I bought the building where Henderson, Blake, and Pierce had their offices, not to evict them or cause problems, just to own it. To know that every month Ashley's firm paid rent to the man she once said wasn't on her level. The irony was delicious, but it wasn't satisfying. What was satisfying was what I did next. I kept working my delivery job, but I started something new. Laura's Table, a nonprofit that provides free meal delivery to elderly people in hospice care. I hired drivers and paid them $30 an hour with full benefits and retirement plans. Good jobs for good people who worked hard and deserved respect. James from the construction crew was my first hire. "You're crazy, man," he laughed when I told him the salary. "But I'm your kind of crazy. Bill Hawkins came out of retirement to help me run the operations side. Always knew you were meant for more than breaking your back in concrete," Bill said gruffly, but his eyes were warm. I met with Richard and Evelyn Whitmore once. They were old, frail, and drowning in regret 34 years too late. They lived in a mansion with 14 bedrooms and no family left to fill them. "You look just like her." Evelyn wept when she saw me. "Just like our Laura." "She wasn't yours," I told them quietly. "She was Frank Carter's wife. She was my mother. You threw her away because she chose love over your money. Turns out she didn't need your money anyway." Richard confined to a wheelchair since his heart attack reached out with a trembling hand. "We were wrong. So terribly wrong. We lost our daughter over pride and prejudice that means nothing now. I forgave them because my mother would have wanted me to. But forgiveness didn't mean relationship. I send them a Christmas card each year with a photo of Laura's Table delivering meals, a reminder that their daughter's true legacy is kindness, not cruelty. 6 months after Margaret died, I was delivering food through Laura's Table to a new hospice patient when I ran into Kelly, the nurse from Cedar Grove Senior Living. She was working at a different facility now, still caring for people in their final days with compassion and grace. "Michael," she said, surprised. "I heard about what you did for Margaret. That was beautiful." We had coffee, then dinner, then more coffee. She didn't care about my money. She cared that I still delivered meals personally every week, that I knew my drivers' kids' names, that I still kept my father's old tools in my truck, even though I'd never need them again. "You could do anything," she said one evening as we watched the sunset from my new apartment, modest despite my wealth. "Why this?" "Because my mother chose love over money and never regretted it," I said. "Because my father chose dignity over disclosure and protected me from a truth that might have corrupted me. Because Margaret chose loyalty 34 years of searching to keep a promise. Because everyone who really loved me chose something harder than money. So now I choose to use money to make love easier for others." Ashley still works at Henderson, Blake, and Pierce. I heard through the grapevine that she made senior associate recently. She's dating a hedge fund manager now, someone on her level. I hope she's happy. I really do, because I understand now that she did me a favor. If she hadn't left me for not being enough, I'd never have discovered that I already was everything. My name is Michael Carter. I'm the son of Frank Carter, who taught me that work has dignity, and Laura Whitmore Carter, who taught me that love is worth any sacrifice. I deliver food to dying people because everyone deserves comfort in their final days. I have $46 million in the bank and calloused hands that I'm proud of. I was told I wasn't on someone's level, and they were right. I was never on their level. I was above it all along. Some people measure worth in dollars and degrees and titles and trophies. But I learned that real worth is measured in promises kept, love given freely, and the integrity to remain yourself when the world tells you you're not enough. My mother knew that. Margaret knew that. And now, finally, so do I. The fortune my mother left me wasn't really about the money. It was about freedom, the freedom to choose who to love, how to live, and what to value. She gave me the one thing her parents never gave her, the absolute certainty that I was enough exactly as I am. And that's worth more than $46 million. That's worth everything. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't measured by someone else's standards, then please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when someone showed you your true value when the world said you weren't enough. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people discovering extraordinary truths about themselves. Because everyone has a story worth telling, and everyone is worth more than they think.